In this next video, we're going to look at another presentation produced by Tesla. So this is their Q4 update for fiscal year 23. So it's one of the regular updates they produce for their investors to tell them how the company has been performing, answering questions that are of interest to investors, and highlighting things that are interesting about how the company is growing and developing. So this presentation is actually one of my favorite investor presentations that I've seen across many different companies over the years. When I first saw it, I was just immediately impressed with the quality and the amount of thought and simplicity that the company has put into preparing this presentation. So it's a very elegant presentation. As you can see, just looking at this first page, you can immediately notice how understated yet stylish it is. Just even looking at this first cover page, there's nothing on here that doesn't need to be on here. So it literally just has very simple black background. So there's no gradients, any other embellishments. It's just plain and simple black color on the background, and then very simple font that has two colors there. So it says Q4 and FY23 in white, and then it says update in gray. And so they use color, white and gray, in a very smart way here to differentiate the two messages. So one message is that it's an update, and then the second message just denotes the period that it refers to. And then the only last thing on this cover page is just the logo Tesla in the bottom right corner of the page. So very simple page, and immediately just sets the tone for what the rest of the presentation is going to look like. And when you look through the rest of the presentation, you don't get disappointed, because the company has clearly put a lot of thought and a lot of care in making sure that the presentation stays within the same visual guidelines throughout the body of the presentation as well. So there's a few things that I really like about this presentation. We already started talking about color, so maybe we'll just continue with that. We can see that the overall black, white, and gray color scheme is maintained throughout the presentation. The only little addition that they have is pale pink, which is used as an accent color to draw attention to certain parts of the page. Like, for example, on this page 4, you can see how they're using pale pink to highlight the latest reporting period and draw the user's eye towards that column. And same on these other pages that also have tables on them. So this is really powerful because firstly, it just stays true to the overall design language that they've selected for this presentation in terms of the colors that they're using. But also secondly, it just feels really well put together, and that they took care when designing their pages and their color scheme. Even the color pink that they use is a particular shade of that color. It is not a saturated version of that color. It's actually an understated version, which sort of goes along the same color scheme that is used elsewhere. So really powerful, really good use of color. The only things I noticed, well, there was a small departure from that consistent use of color, was in some of the pages like these ones where they have charts and text. And you can see that, for example, on this page, they're actually using 3 additional colors. So they're using a red, a blue, and a green. And those 3 colors just don't really seem to match the rest of the presentation. And then similarly on these other pages, they're using blue and red, both pretty bright versions of blue and red. And you can see how those colors also just seem to break with the rest of the color scheme of the presentation. So these are the only 2 departures that I noticed that sort of caught my eye, but by and large, the rest of it seems pretty consistent and pretty well executed. So the second thing that I really like about this presentation is the use of photos. So there's a whole second section of the presentation that just has 8 different slides that are based around photos. So for example, this one, it just says Model Y is the best-selling vehicle globally in 2023. And all it has is just a photo of Model Y on a sandy beach with a surfboard attached to the roof. So it doesn't really feel like it needs to show you data back in that claim, or a table, or quotes, or anything like that, which they could have done. And so this page would have then sort of looked and felt quite different compared to what it is doing now. But this is just such an elegant way to communicate that message. I think what they're trying to say is that if you don't believe us, if you don't believe this claim, you can go and look it up yourself. But we don't feel the need to prove it to you. And so instead of doing that, we're just going to show you a really pretty picture of what Model Y looks like. And so it's really powerful because it does reflect their own confidence in the performance of Model Y, but it also is just a great way to connect emotionally with the investors as well, because a picture really is able to communicate a lot of information that otherwise would just take lots and lots of text to communicate, and that message might not even land properly. So if they tried to convince you that Model Y was an elegant car, and how it can be used for active lifestyle and for going to the beach and for taking a surfboard with you and being a family car, they could have tried to convey all of that through text, but it probably wouldn't have had the same effect as it does compared to how they've decided to do it, which is just through showing you exactly all those messages visually, and you can see it for yourself and then sort of internalize all those messages, even if you don't fully understand that you are internalizing them. And they do this throughout the second section as well. So you can see how there's a page that talks about Model 3, there's a page that showcases the factory and a worker, and the caption just says that they produced nearly 500,000 vehicles in 2023, an all-time record. There's a page that shows the Cybertruck delivery event, and it shows people excited to be there, all with their phones out, capturing the moment. So it sort of conveys that cult-like following that Tesla is able to muster from the audience. It shows you a photo of a Cybertruck sitting on top of some snow, some rugged terrain in the background, and it just sort of conveys how that vehicle is also made for thriving in difficult driving conditions. It shows you a production line for the Cybertruck, which then sort of tells you that this car is coming and it's a reality. It's not just a concept. It shows you the Megapack production line, and then it shows you some wraps for some of their vehicles. So just a really unusual and powerful way to evoke a whole bunch of emotions from the reader, whilst not trying to tell the reader what to think, but sort of nudging the reader towards conclusions that Tesla wants you to make when you listen or read through this presentation. The next thing that is also interesting about this presentation is just the use of tables. Again, really, really well executed, very simple tables. What they do well here is how they try not to overload it and actually use quite a bit of white space in between rows of information that is similar. So for example, on this page that says operational summary, it starts with showing you the first 3 rows, which is production of the different models. Then the next 4 rows, which shows you deliveries. Then the next rows show you vehicle count, global vehicle inventory, and so on. So you can see how they could have made this this information into one continuous table with no breaks in between rows, but they decided not to. And so that again is a powerful way how you can split information and make it easier to digest, because instead of trying to understand and take in 15 different rows of information and try to make sense how they all relate to each other, they have already subdivided that information for you, and so it just makes it easier to digest what it is that they're trying to tell you about. The other thing that's really, really cool about this presentation is also the use of text. In particular, this page that has highlights on the left-hand side and then a summary on the right-hand side is really well executed as well. You can see again the principle of using white space in action and how it makes this page look elegant, even though it's just full of text and nothing else besides text. But you can see how the highlight section is split into buckets: profitability, cash, and operations. And so that again just helps you make sense of an otherwise laundry list of bullet points. They're also not using bullet points at all, which is also a good choice because they don't really need bullet points because there's already white space in between the different lines of text. And so bullet points would just be excessive, trying to tell you that these are separate bits of information, which you can already tell through the presence of that white space. And on the right-hand side where it says summary, again, they try to keep it short, so it's only 6 paragraphs, and each paragraph is mostly 3 lines in depth, and then only some have 4 lines in depth. So they are avoiding using really long paragraphs, which are harder to digest and understand. And then you can see that they are using a bit of supplementary information in the footnotes in the bottom right-hand corner, but then they visually make you understand that it's footnotes and less important than the rest of the text through firstly making it gray as opposed to white, and then secondly making the text font size smaller than the main text on the page. And so again, really, really well done on how well the text-based pages have been executed, like you can see throughout the presentation. The next thing that I that I really liked about this page is just the flow of the storyline. So if you just trace it through, you can see how they start with the financial summary, firstly showing it to you on a quarterly basis and then on an annualized basis. Then they also describe to you what the key messages are in terms of the financial summary that you should remember. After they're done with the financial summary, they jump into an operational summary, again, quarterly and annual. Then they say, look, we've performed like this financially and operationally. This is how much capacity we have for producing our cars. So it sort of flows from the operational messages, which talk about production. This then kind of defines how much production is possible. Then they talk about another operational topic, which is technology. So they're keeping it minimalistic here as well. Only have 3 major updates. I'm sure there's more, but they've selected 3 that they want to talk about. Then they have other highlights where they talk about energy storage, solar, and services and other business. Again, I'm sure there's more than 3. They just decided consciously to focus on the 3 most important ones. So these are other operational updates. And then finally, they said, look, this is what we have been doing, but this is what we think the future looks like, which is their Outlook page. And so there again, they try to keep it to a relatively manageable list of only 4 different things: volume, cash, profit, and product. And they just describe what they think the Outlook looks like for those 4 things. So very, very easy to follow from a storyline perspective. Very straightforward. Sections sort of link into each other logically. And so it's just really easy to follow the story that they're trying to tell their audience. The only couple of nitpicks that I had about this presentation is that the second section, which is called photos and charts, it does have the first 8 pages, which are photos based, but then there are 2 pages at the back, which are charts. And these 2 pages seem a little bit out of place to me. The design here looks a little bit different. Again, the colors that they're using, blue and red, seem to be out of line with the rest of the color scheme. So they could have presented the charts using black and gray, for example. That would have been more elegant, I think. But then also these pages feel like appendix pages, and so it's a little bit unclear why they decided to put them here. Most likely because they didn't want to have a separate appendix section just for those 2 pages of charts, and so they decided that where it could do the least damage was sort of clubbing it together with picture-based pages. And then the only other nitpick that I had was just not using slightly more sophisticated charting. So the charts they're using are all pretty straightforward, and they tend to be the same type of chart, which in general is actually a really, really good tactic. But to spice things up a little bit, they could probably find 1 or 2 metrics where they could have told the story in a slightly different way visually, just using a bit more sophisticated type of chart somewhere. For example, combining a bar chart with some bubbles across the top to provide additional information on something, to make it less one-dimensional and sort of tell a richer story. But then again, I think, you know, in the interest of simplicity, I think that was actually maybe a good design choice that they've made. So overall, like I said in the beginning, very impressed with this presentation. It just feels very different to all the other investor presentations that I've seen. And it shows you as a reader that this company really cares about design and not just functionality. So they could have presented all of this information and more, and turned this whole presentation into a bit of a data dump for you to then make sense of, but they decided not to. So they took their time to make it simpler and easier to follow and understand, and so just shows you the care that they've put into it from a design perspective. So really good presentation, lots to learn from, and a good example of how you can do corporate storytelling elegantly.